If you've ever been to a fandom convention or a writer's conference, you know how valuable and entertaining panels can be. But if you've never been to a Multiverse Convention panel, you have no idea how amazing they truly are. Multiverse has a knack for making virtually any panel into a free-flowing conversation, one that doesn't always stay in the room or stay within its hour. Attendees and panelists alike often continue the conversation well after the panel is officially over. And this year, as Go Indie Now turns the spotlight on the Multiverse Convention with our ongoing series, in addition to our interview sessions, we've also put together a few panels modeling what a multiverse panel is like, in hopes that you get the feeling for what those who have experienced it already know. Once you've been to a multiverse panel, you want them all to be that way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kenneth Broome, and I am the track director for the Learn track at Multiverse. Tonight, I should say, I'm going to be giving you a presentation that kind of shows you the things you can expect and look for when you go to a Learn track panel. So I also want to note that we do have, regular 4-person, 5-person panels, but the majority of our panels, are 1 or 2 people presenting on their kind of research, all connected to speculative fiction in some way, because we always want to make sure that we're making speculative fiction and these academic presentations accessible to everyone who attends our panels. So today I'm going to be giving you one that brings back a little nostalgia for me, because it is the first presentation that I ever gave at the very first Multiverse back in 2019, as you can see from the date. And it's something that I have continued to talk about in all of my classes, even since then, So let's get started. So this panel, this presentation, I should say, as you can see, is called Friends with the Monster. And it's basically this idea of how do we come about understanding and knowing where these monsters came from that we see in our speculative fiction movies, television shows, and stories. So I want to start by the kind of beginning of what I think about when it comes to monster culture, which is this book called Monster Theory Reading Culture by Dr. Jeffrey Cohen. And he has these things called his 7 monster theories. Now, I'm only going to talk about 4 because I think these are the 4 most important. Don't get me wrong, the other 3 are important as well, but I think these really stand out in the understanding of how monsters are created and how we understand them. And the first starts with thesis 1, which is the monster's body is the cultural body, which basically, as you can see in this little explanation of it, we create the monster from our worries, our fears, our questions of life, existence, and what is out there. It is all this brought to life. Basically, the monster is us. The monster comes from the things that we are scared of, the things that we're afraid of. It comes from the things that we worry about, the questions about life, like what is out there beyond our front door, but also out there in the world, like what is out there. I mean, we end up creating these like monstrosities and these monsters from that feeling, from those feelings. The second, skipping over 2 and 3, is the monster dwells at the gates of difference. We make the monster or the thing that we fear something that we can hate so that we don't mourn its destruction. We also co-create the means for its destruction. Whenever we create a monster, we always have to make sure that there's a way to destroy the monster, because we have to feel like we're in charge. We have to find that sense of calm again. As long as the monster is around, there is no calm. So we have to have a way to destroy that monster so that we can get back to that calm. And because we created it, we create this means of destruction. Skipping 5 and going to 6, fear of the monster is really a kind of desire. Though we fear the monster, we are also attracted to the allure of the monster and of the unknown. The monster both scares and fascinates us. And when we think about people who watch horror movies, especially, I'll say it for myself. I love watching horror movies. And while I can be afraid of these horror movies, there is an allure and why I continue to go back to watching horror movies because I like that feeling, that fascination that I have with this monstrosity, with these monsters. When I was little, I used to watch a lot of Monster Vision. They used to come on TNT at like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, staying up late when I wasn't supposed to, and seeing those old monsters like the original, like the Blob that was in black and white, Jason the Argonauts, things like that. And I enjoyed these adventures and these monsters that they fought, and was fascinated by them and have been ever since. And that fascination is something that even though we're afraid of it, we want to kind of get to know what this is. We want to see it more and more. And last but not least is Thesis 7. The monster stands at the threshold of becoming. New monsters are born every day. They all exist in our minds and fear, our minds and fear just waiting in the darkness to come out. When I think a perfect example now I think about it is Megan. Megan would not be a monstrosity that would have existed years ago. And by years ago, I mean lots of years ago, because there was no idea of some type of android creature. Now, don't get me wrong, robots, yes, but not something as sophisticated as Megan is. And that idea comes from the this ever evolving world that we live in, this ever evolving things that we come in contact with, things that we create, and suddenly now we have something new to fear. As AI becomes more and more ingrained, excuse me, in our everyday life, there becomes this fear of like, what if it takes over? Now, don't get me wrong, we've had movies where AI has taken over before, and but not to the extent, excuse me, that we have now. When it comes to the other theses, if you ever want to know what they are, 2 is the monster always escapes, basically because we created it and people will always continue to create it, excuse me. I'm gonna slow down because I'm messing up a little bit. But they always continue to be in existence because more people think about them and more people want to see them, and there's no reason for them to actually die because they were never real in the first place. Think about Jason, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Candyman, Chucky. How many movies those killers have just combined together? This is because they never were real, so they never actually died because they get another sequel, and then they get another sequel, and then they get another sequel. I think Jason going to space is probably one of the craziest sequels I can think about. But once again, it's because he was never real, so he gets to go on these adventures and not die. Even Leprechaun goes to Leprechaun goes to the hood, and then he went back to the hood in another sequel. So these monsters that we have don't actually die. The 3 is the monster is the harbinger of category crisis, which basically just means that the monster is a problem for us because we created the problem in the first place. So it stands as the problem that we created from the problem in the first place. It's really interesting to explain that one. Sorry if it doesn't make sense, but long story short, the monster is just the problem we created. And 5 is the monster polices the borders of the possible. The monster will always have some type of the monster will always have some type of possibility of being in existence because it's not real in the first place. All these kind of tie together if you get where I'm going with this, but because it never really existed, it always has a possibility of existing again. Thinking about how take Stack and Mary in Sinners. While yes, we saw the monsters die, we see in the 90s they're still around because we see that because the monster was always possible, it will never die. It always has a reason to come back. And this is why there are a bunch of vampire movies, a bunch of zombie movies, because these monsters will always be possible in some way. So let's move on to talking about some of these monsters. Probably the most well-known monster is the vampire. And since I just brought up sinners, yes, the vampire. So the idea of the vampire, when we think about it, we have this kind of, when I'm talking to my students, I ask them like, what is their image of a vampire? And a lot of times they will say, fangs, they drink blood, they can turn into bats, they only come out at night, capes and things like that. They have this kind of idea of the vampire. And it's interesting that they have that idea because that image is kind of the old image that we have of the vampire. Such as Count Orlok and Nosferatu that came out in 1922, and then Dracula played by Bela Lugosi in 1931. These are the oldest, I'm pretty sure, Dracula movies that are both based on Bram Stoker's novel. Now, for those who do not know, Count Orlok is also Dracula, but because it was not, they didn't go through the proper channels, they couldn't call it Dracula and had to also change his name to make him fit, to get by and not have to like pay for not going through the proper channels. But he is also basically Dracula. And as you can see, there's a stark difference between the two. But a lot of times, that early Dracula idea is Bela Lugosi's Dracula, the very charismatic, suave, charming guy who has this kind of ability to charm women. That is one of his things that he does, and that kind of gets not thrown out the window, but changed when we think of these newer vampires that we have, and it changes because these newer vampires all look young and beautiful. So they don't necessarily have that ability to charm someone because they already look good in our eyes. They already look like someone we want to be with and someone we want to be around. So there's no reason for them to necessarily have the ability to charm because they themselves look good and are charming. And one of the other things that changes besides just that is this kind of family orientation that a lot of these vampires end up having, or wanting to have kind of like a close connection with people, such as in Twilight, where they want to get married and have families, or in Interview with a Vampire, where while yes, he is he is kind of all over the place, there is this kind of want for a connection with something. Whereas in these older movies, when we see vampires, they're very kind of to themselves, alone, very evil, I'll say. Because they are monsters. They were very evil. But now we have this kind of family orientation of the monster. But one of the things about these monsters, once again, if we go back to talking about the monster thesis or the seventh thesis, is that these monsters represent a fear for us, and vampires actually represent two fears, and those fears are our fear of lust and our fear of aging. And it should be, both of these should make sense because vampires are young and beautiful. They can live out their lustful lives. Nobody's going to stop them. They don't have to worry about getting any diseases, about having children. They can just be completely sexual. And I wanted to use the beautiful late great Aaliyah as Akasha in Queen of the Damned as this beautiful idea of this sexuality that is present within the vampire. And also I had to use Mary from Sinners because basically she goes outside. When she comes back inside, she's a very different person, as Stack says to her. She's a very lustful type person, and that fear of our lust is something that is represented by the vampire. But once again, remember, we have to have a way to kill it, and of course the way to kill it is the sunlight. Why is there a connection between this lust and the sunlight? Well, this is because if we think of that old saying, the freaks come out at night, basically this idea of being hidden and undercover and doing all this dirt in the dark cannot hide anything in the light. So the light is the antithesis to the things that the vampire does in the night. or in the darkness or in the cover of darkness. So that is why you have the sunlight being one of the things that can take out the vampire. The other thing is the idea of our fear of aging. Whether we admit it or not, a lot of people are very vain. Um, we have all of these different types of cosmetics or surgeries to kind of enhance our beauty and make us look good for as long as possible. And it's because we are afraid of aging. We're afraid of looking wrinkly and old, and it makes us feel like we're getting closer to the grave. So people try to look as beautiful and as young as long as possible. And the vampire does not have to worry about that. The vampire will always be beautiful and young if they were turned at that point in their life, but they will always look beautiful and young forever. So there's no reason for them to be afraid of aging. They're going to look good. And once again, part of the reason that we want to destroy or have that, or we're able to destroy that monster or that part of us, is because we don't want to admit to our vanity. So we drive a stake through its heart, through the thing that is loving, that loves this idea of being young. We find out a way to get rid of it. So sunlight, stake through the heart, things like that. Some way to destroy that part of us. But once again, it's not going anywhere because these things are always going to be a thing. Therefore, the vampire appears in another movie, and in another movie, and in another television show. Now, let's go to the counterpart to the werewolf. I mean, vampire, the werewolf. So the werewolf represents our fear of our primal anger. I go ahead and tell you that now. And this is because werewolves, when you think about how they transform, well, when you think about when you're angry, right? Some people experience this level of anger where they say they black out and they don't remember what they did after they were angry or after they blackout. Like if they took somebody's life, if they destroyed a car, if they did whatever in that state of anger, they have blacked out. And it's because they've allowed this kind of bestial anger, this primal anger to take over. And the werewolf represents that primal anger. The werewolf does not have to care that it is angry because it is a beast. Because its anger is triggered by something that has made it upset or made the person upset. Now they can let go of that bestial anger and transform into this werewolf. Usually when I'm talking to my students, I ask them about the idea of the transformation. Like, have you ever thought about what it might feel like to transform, or what it feels like for these beasts to transform? A lot of times it doesn't necessarily look the best. From American Werewolf in London in 1981, as you can see, this does not look like it is, like it feels good. And I asked my students, like, is this the kind of, if you could choose to be a vampire or werewolf, would you want to have to transform like this? Would you want to have to, feel this your body literally changing because you are so angry? And the idea of the anger comes from having to, being ready to fight. In Underworld and in Twilight, literally the werewolves and literally the werewolves transform because they are ready to fight, because they're getting ready to take somebody on, because their anger has triggered them and now they got to get ready to fight. In Underworld, it does look a lot more I guess horrifying than it does in Twilight. But still, there's this idea that you have to, that as you are changing, it is going to hurt because you're becoming that beast, because you're letting it take over. Now, there's a funny example I give my students when I'm talking about this, and it's from these two things: Blood and Chocolate and Hemlock Grove. So these are two of the most extreme opposite transformations. In Blood and Chocolate, as you can see from the example, from the little picture here, GIF here, for a second it looks like she's about to transform into a Power Ranger, and then suddenly she is a wolf. That is our main character. And in Hemlock Grove, if you cannot tell, the claws of his wolf form are bursting through his skin like Wolverine's claws. Literally, the wolf, because he's going to transform into a wolf, not a werewolf, standing on two legs, but it is literally pushing out from under his skin. The paws come out of his hands. His eyes are yellow because his actual human eyes have already fallen out, and those are the wolf eyes. His teeth are going to begin to fall out. And basically his mouth will split open and the muzzle of the wolf will come out. His back will split open and the wolf will fur will be under it. Like, it is a very hard to watch transformation. And that's the way he transforms. So I always ask my students, like, okay, now if you had to transform like this, would you want to be a werewolf? And usually they're like, no, of course, because it's really horrifying. But it represents the idea of when you are angry, like you're transforming into something bestial, something that is not very nice and doesn't have to worry about being very nice at all. Next, let's move on to the zombie. The zombie represents our fear of death, or seeing our mortality looking back at us. My students will sometimes ask me why doesn't the vampire represent our fear of death since it is dead? And I usually tell them it's because vampires look like regular people. In Twilight, even though it's not that good, they could go to school and just look like regular people. They just couldn't do it while the sun was out. But other than that, they just look like regular people. So there's no reason to kind of think of them as being death or being afraid of them because of death. Whereas the zombie, literally, you're looking at the deceased body in front of you. As you can see, you're looking at a corpse that is rotting. You're seeing your mortality in front of you. And when we think about like this idea of being afraid of death, once again, if we think about it, when I, earlier when I said the idea, we have a way to destroy the thing that we're afraid of. Zombies are probably the one thing that we don't have a clear idea of how to destroy it in some way. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that everybody's going to die at some point, unfortunately. And there's no way to stop that at all. In Return of the Living Dead, which is this movie right here, they burned the bodies, but then the military dropped a bomb on the city and created more zombies. In Night of the Living Dead, the first one, the original one, I don't even remember how that one actually ends. I know what it is. They understood that they could shoot the zombie in the head and it'll die, but we never get an idea of like, do they get all the zombies? Which we can assume that they do, but we never really get the confirmation that they actually do. And in these two movies, 28 days later, 28 weeks later, because there's a sequel, clearly the zombies were not killed. And if there is a new zombie 28 months later. Yeah, 28 months later, they came out. So the zombies have not gone anywhere. And I think out of all of the monsters, the zombie has had such a interesting evolution as well when it comes to the older ones and the newer ones. So when we first get zombie movies, and by zombie movies, I mean the kind of shambling corpse zombies, they're slow and human-like, but they're really smart. So if you've never seen Night of the Living Dead, in Night of the Living Dead, the zombie literally picks up a rock to break a window. He also pulls out a cord so that the woman inside who is running from him cannot, call for help or anything like that. They're actually quite smart. Fast forward to the zombies of today, they don't have to be intelligent. They don't need that. They all just fast, and it's a bunch of them. Both of these scenes are from World War Z, and as you can see, they just fast and a bunch of them. We not escaping them. Like Usain Bolt cannot outrun them. Like you have to be able to try and take them down in some way. But as you can see, there really wasn't a way to stop them in World War Z. They did come up with that infect yourself with a non-lethal disease and they'll leave you alone, which okay, but still, it's not like they killed them. They were still there. And also, we have this evolution of the zombie into other genres. Now, don't be wrong, all the other ones also go into these other genres, but I think the zombie has had the best kind of outcome when it comes to these other genres, such as comedies like Zombieland, Shaun of the Dead, romance movies such as Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and Warm Bodies. And then these two movies right here are hilarious because for me they're kind of like YA zombie movies. This one's called Cooties, and it's so funny because the only zombies in the movies are kids, a bunch of elementary school children who ate. It started because this one kid or several kids eat infected chicken nuggets at lunch that kills them, turns into zombies, and then they start going after the teachers. And these are some of the teachers in the classroom. Sorry, I couldn't find a good image to use of the kids, being zombies. And then this movie, I found this movie just randomly one day, some years ago, and watching it was so funny to me. It was so good to me. It's called Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. And there's a zombie cat about to attack one of our scouts. So it's about 3 Boy Scouts who get caught in the zombie apocalypse that they didn't know was coming. And basically, we follow their antics, trying to be good Boy Scouts while also trying to take down zombies. And it's really, really funny. So, like I said, while all monsters have had kind of like a fort, have kind of like moved into other genres like comedy or romance, I think the zombie has such an interesting evolution into it more than the others, because this is supposed to be something that shouldn't be funny, or that shouldn't be like also having a romance, versus like the other two that look human. Like, we can understand why they have romance movies or why they have comedy movies, because they look human, whereas these are rotting corpses. Next, we're going to get into probably what is my favorite monster, which is the witch. Now, witches have an interesting thing that we fear from them, and it should be pretty obvious, is that we fear their power. Um, Basically, we feel like the idea of being controlled, I should say, by power, someone having a power over us or some way to control us, that we cannot fight against. And in every one of these movies, you have some type of witch, who does have that kind of like control. Now, when it comes to Wicked and the Wiz, it's a little, nobody's really trying to, well, Eveline. um anyway, but you have this idea of someone who has this magical power that you cannot stop, that you cannot fight against, because you are just a regular person. You can't fight magic. You don't know how to stop anything like this Sanderson sisters, or the witches from the Coven, or if you've never seen this scene from Teen Witch, please go watch it. Hilarious. But and probably one of my favorite witches as a child, the Grand High Witch from Roald Dahl's The Witches. 10 out of 10. I haven't seen the new one because it didn't really look like I wanted to see it, but Angelica Houston, 10 out of 10. But one of the things that I found the most interesting as I began to kind of wrap this up is the idea of when we think about power, right? Especially when we think about witches in general, we think that power has to be something magical, or has to come from some magic means. But the truth is, we have people who have power and are completely not magical. So if you've never heard of this guy, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people have, this is Reverend Jim Jones. As I said, magic doesn't always mean having power. It just means having powers. It just means having power. And this is someone who had power. He had the power of persuasion. I won't go into too many details because they're kind of gory. Well, not gory, but it's a lot. He is probably responsible for the largest mass murder suicide in one day, with nearly 1,000 people dying on one day. Nearly 1,000 people dying on one day. And all of them did it because they followed his religion. And it's not like he created a religion per se. He starts off as a Christian minister in a town in Indiana. He builds a following. And at this point, while he's building his following, he is kind of moving towards the cult-like mentality. And that leads him to tell his congregation, we being persecuted, we got to move. So he moves his congregation to California. They grow even bigger. He's a complete charlatan. He's performing fake miracles and things like that, making the easily manipulated people in his audience believe that he is some type of God, basically. And when he is getting when his congregation is getting persecuted in California because people are leaving his religion and going to the authorities, and he's getting wind of, like, they're coming after us. He moves his congregation to Johnstown, Guyana in South America, and they build build their own little community down there. And a senator, I cannot remember the senator's name, was contacted about some people who were able to get away from there. Like, hey, y'all got to send some people down here. It's bad. He goes down there. What he sees does not look good to him. So when he's on his way back, Jim Jones has men go and take him out, and the other people who are leaving with him. And on that day, they all drink the Kool-Aid. It wasn't Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid was actually Flavor Aid. But yeah. And there are pictures from that day of aerial photos of that day. So if you ever want to look it up, you can. But once again, this man had no magical power. He had the power of persuasion, which, we're seeing that happen in real time. How someone who can persuade people very easily, who are easily persuaded and easily manipulated, can be led to do and believe something that is not true. And Jim Jones was able to do that, unfortunately. And he did it by using the thing that most people connect to, their religion. That's probably the thing that's always going to be the easiest to manipulate someone if you can get to their religion, because a lot of people hold it so dear and so close to them. And that is what he was able to do. And that was what he was able to use. So I think that is going to wrap this up. That is my last monster. Literally a monster. But yes, that's my last monster. So I'm going to wrap this up. Like I said, this is what we do in the Learn track. We break down these speculative things in interesting academic ways. It is not, hopefully, it is so in a way that everybody who comes can understand it and get into it. So if you're at Multiverse this year, please come to our Learn track and see some of our presentations, especially our student presentations that we're having this year. We have 3 of those, one on each day of the the con. Friday, we're going to have a video games society. Then we have 2 other panels in the Learn track. I do not remember the names of them right now, but they are going to be all student led. So please come and enjoy any and all of our panels during Multiverse this year. So that's going to be it. Finally, yeah, this is going to be it. So once again, I'm Kenneth Broome, and I'm the Learn track director. I hope you come and see us at Learn track at Multiverse this year. Bye.